Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Anthony Kane with the Complete Connection Parenting Program, and I'm here with another parent tip of the day. And today we're going to tackle a really important topic that I know frustrates parents all over the world. And that is, what do you do when your child looks you straight in the eye and says, I don't care what you do, I don't care about the consequence you just gave me, I don't care if you take away my phone, I don't care if you ground me, I just don't care. And parents, when they hear this, it drives them absolutely crazy. It makes them feel powerless. It makes them feel like they've lost all control. It makes them feel like nothing they do matters anymore. And I want to talk to you today about why children say this, what's really going on underneath the surface, and what you can actually do about it, because there's a lot more happening here than meets the eye. So let's start with the basics. When your child tells you they don't care about a consequence you just gave them, your first reaction is probably anger or frustration, or maybe even despair. You might think, oh my goodness, I've lost my child. They really have become so defiant, so oppositional, that nothing I do matters anymore. They genuinely don't care about anything. And I've failed as a parent. But I want to stop you right there, because that's almost never what's actually happening in reality. Your child almost certainly does care. And I'm going to explain why, and how you can know that, and what to do about it. Think back to when your child was younger, maybe 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old, and you took away a toy, or you gave them a timeout, or you told them no about something they wanted. What happened? They cried, right? They screamed, they threw a tantrum. They showed you very clearly that they were upset, that they cared deeply about what you just did. They wore their emotions on their sleeve. They didn't hide anything from you, and that's because young children haven't learned yet to mask their feelings. They haven't learned yet to put up defenses. They haven't learned yet to protect themselves emotionally from feeling controlled, or feeling like they're losing, or feeling like they're being beaten down by authority. But as children get older, something changes. They start to develop what we call ego defenses. They start to learn that if they show you that something bothers them, then you have power over them. And nobody likes to feel powerless. Nobody likes to feel controlled. Nobody likes to feel like someone else is winning and they're losing. And this is especially true during the preteen teenage years, when children are naturally trying to establish their independence, trying to figure out who they are separate from their parents, trying to assert some control over their own lives. So when you give your child a consequence, and they say, I don't care, what they're really doing most of the time is putting up a defense mechanism. They're trying to protect themselves from feeling powerless. They're trying to protect their ego. They're trying to maintain some sense of control, even if it's just the control of not letting you see that you got to them. It's like a poker face. They're bluffing, they're pretending they have a better hand than they actually do, because they don't want you to know that you've won this round. And here's how you can tell if your child really does care underneath that facade. Let's say you took away your daughter's cell phone because she was texting during homework time, and she rolled her eyes and said, I don't care, take it, I don't even like that stupid phone. Anyway, well, watch what happens over the next few hours. Does she keep asking about the phone? Does she try to negotiate to get it back? Does she ask if her friend can call the house phone instead? Does she seem irritable or moody, or does she stomp off to her room? These are all signs that she does care. She's just not willing to admit it to you. She's not willing to give you the satisfaction of knowing that your consequence affected her. Or let's say you grounded your son from video games for the weekend because he didn't do his chores, and he shrugged and said, fine, I don't care, I was getting bored of those games anyway. But then you notice him wandering around the house, aimlessly looking for something to do, asking what time it is, asking when the weekend will be over, complaining that he's bored. These are signs that he does care. He's just protecting his ego by pretending he doesn't. So the first thing I want you to understand is that in most cases, when your child says, I don't care, they actually do care. They're just not going to admit it. And that's okay. You don't need them to admit it. You don't need them to break down and beg for forgiveness or plead with you to give back what you took away. The consequence is still working, even if they're pretending it's not. And actually, it's a sign of growing maturity that they can control their emotional reactions, even if it's frustrating for you as a parent now. Having said all that, there is a second possibility, and that is that your child genuinely doesn't care. And if that's the case, then we need to figure out why, because there are several reasons why a child might genuinely not care about a consequence, and each reason requires a different solution. The first reason your child might genuinely not care is that you gave a consequence that has no connection to the behavior you're trying to correct. And more importantly, you gave a consequence that gives your child no opportunity to fix the problem or demonstrate better behavior. This is one of the biggest mistakes I see parents make all over the world. And I've been doing this for many, many years now, and I see it in every country I visit. I see it in every culture I work with. It's almost universal. Here's what I mean. Let's say your child came home late from a friend's house. They were supposed to be home at 6 o'clock, and they came home at 7:30, and you're upset because you were worried and they didn't call. And they broke the rule, so you say that's it, you're grounded for 2 weeks, no, going out, no friends, nothing for 2 weeks. Now your child says, I don't care. And here's the thing, they might actually not care, because what you just gave them is what I call time-based punishment. It's like sending someone to prison for a fixed sentence. They can't do anything to reduce the sentence. They can't do anything to demonstrate that they've learned their lesson. They can't do anything to fix the problem. All they can do is wait it out, do the time. And when you give this kind of consequence, children often genuinely don't care because they feel powerless to change anything. They think, well, I'm stuck with this punishment. No matter what I do, so why should I care? Why should I try to behave better? Why should I apologize? Why should I show remorse? None of that will change anything, so I might as well just not care and wait for the 2 weeks to be over. And this is a huge problem because this kind of punishment doesn't teach anything, it doesn't improve behavior, it doesn't help your child learn to make better choices. It just makes them resentful and it makes them shut down emotionally. So, what's the alternative? The alternative is what I call behavior based consequences instead of time based punishment. And here's how it works: instead of saying you're grounded for 2 weeks, you say you're grounded until you can show me 3 times that you come home on time and call if you're going to be late. Or instead of saying no cell phone for a week, you say no cell phone until I see that your homework is done every night for 3 nights in a row. Or instead of saying no video games for the weekend, you say no video games until the kitchen is cleaned and your room is picked up and you've helped your sister with her project. You see the difference in the first approach, the time-based approach. The child has no control, they can't do anything to change the outcome, so they shut down and say, I don't care. But in the second approach, the behavior-based approach, the child has complete control. They can get their privilege back anytime they want just by demonstrating the behavior you want to see. And this gives them motivation, it gives them hope. It gives them a reason to care, because now the consequence isn't just a punishment, it's an opportunity to learn and grow and demonstrate better behavior. And here's the beautiful thing about behavior-based consequences: when you use them, your child will almost never say, I don't care. Because they do care, they want to get their privilege back, and now they have a clear path to do that. They know exactly what they need to do, and they know that as soon as they do it, they'll get what they want back. So instead of shutting down and pretending not to care, they're motivated to change their behavior. And that's exactly what you want now. There's a third possibility for why your child might say, I don't care, and genuinely mean it, and that is that you picked the wrong consequence. You picked something that your child actually doesn't value that much, and this happens more often than you might think. Because parents often assume they know what their child cares about, but they don't always get it right. For example, you might think your child really cares about their cell phone, so you take it away as a consequence, but maybe your child has actually been feeling overwhelmed by social media lately. Maybe they've been feeling stressed about all the messages and the drama and the pressure to respond to everyone. And so when you take away the phone, they actually feel relieved. They actually don't mind at all. And when they say, I don't care, they really mean it. Or maybe you ground your child from going to a friend's house, but that child has actually been feeling anxious about that friendship. Lately, maybe there's been some conflict, or maybe they were feeling pressured to do something they didn't want to do. And so when you ground them, they're actually grateful for the excuse not to go, and when they say, I don't care, they genuinely don't. Or maybe you take away video games, but your child has actually been getting more interested in reading lately or drawing or something else. And so they really don't mind losing the video games that much. So how do you know if you've picked the wrong consequence? Well, you watch, and you pay attention. If you take away the cell phone, and your child genuinely seems fine, doesn't ask about it, doesn't seem bothered, doesn't try to negotiate, doesn't show any signs of missing it, then you probably picked the wrong consequence. If you ground them, and they seem perfectly content to stay home, then you probably picked the wrong consequence. And that's okay, it's not a failure on your part. It just means you need to adjust, you need to find something else that your child actually values. And here's the key: every child cares about something, every child has something that matters to them, something they value, something they would be upset to lose. You just have to figure out what it is, and sometimes that requires observation and attention and communication. Maybe it's not the cell phone, maybe it's the computer or the tablet, maybe it's not going to friends' houses, maybe it's playing on the sports team or going to practice, maybe it's not video games, maybe it's art supplies or books or time with a particular family member or staying up late or having control over what they wear or privacy in their room. There's always something. And sometimes you have to ask your child. You can say, look, I need to find consequences that actually matter to you because I want to help you learn to make better choices. What are some things that are really important to you? What are some privileges you really value? And some kids will actually tell you honestly, especially if you approach it in a collaborative way instead of a punitive way. Now, I want to talk about another really important aspect of this whole issue, And that is your reaction when your child says, I don't care, because how you respond in that moment makes a huge difference in whether the consequence will be effective or not. Here's what usually happens: a parent gives a consequence, the child says, I don't care, and the parent gets angry or frustrated, and they escalate. They say, oh, you don't care? Well, then, I'll give you something to care about. You're grounded for a month now, or actually, I'm taking away your phone and your computer and your video games, and you can't see your friends for the rest of the semester. And the parent keeps piling on more and more consequences because they're trying to find something that will break through that I don't care facade. They're trying to get a reaction, they're trying to win. But here's the problem: when you do this, you're actually making things worse. Because now you're in a power struggle, and power struggles with children never end well. You're teaching your child that you're out of control, that you're reactive, that they can push your buttons, and you're also giving consequences that are way too harsh for the original behavior. And that feels unfair to the child, and it breeds resentment, and it makes them dig in even deeper to their I don't care position. Because now it's not just about protecting their ego, it's about resisting what feels like unfair, tyrannical treatment. So, what should you do instead when your child says, I don't care? Here's what I recommend: you stay calm. You don't react, you don't escalate, you just calmly say, okay, that's fine, you don't have to care, the consequence still stands. And then you walk away, you don't argue, you don't try to convince them that they should care. You don't try to make them feel bad, you don't pile on more consequences, you just state the consequence calmly and clearly, and then you follow through. And here's what happens when you do this: your child doesn't get the reaction they were looking for. They were trying to push your buttons, they were trying to get you upset, they were trying to engage you in a power struggle. And you didn't take the bait. And so that I don't care statement just falls flat. It doesn't accomplish anything, and they're left sitting with the consequence, and over time it will start to bother them even if they don't show it, even if they don't admit it. I've seen this happen so many times. A child says, I don't care, when they lose their phone, and the parent stays calm and just says, okay, fine, and walks away. And then a few hours later, the child comes back and says, so, when can I get my phone back? Or can I at least use it to call my friend? Or can I earn it back early? And the parent knows, aha, they do care, they were just bluffing. And now that I didn't react, they're willing to drop the facade. Staying calm is so important because it keeps you in control. It keeps you from making decisions based on anger or frustration. It keeps the consequence proportional to the behavior. And it teaches your child that their attempts to manipulate you emotionally won't work. Now, let me talk about one more really important concept. And that is the difference between punishment and discipline. Because I think a lot of parents don't understand this difference, and it leads to a lot of problems. Punishment is about making a child suffer for what they did wrong. It's about inflicting pain or discomfort or deprivation as payback for bad behavior. It's backward looking. It focuses on what the child did wrong in the past, and it's designed to make them regret it. And punishment might stop behavior in the short term because children want to avoid the pain, but it doesn't teach anything. It doesn't build skills. It doesn't help children make better choices in the future. Discipline, on the other hand, is about teaching. Discipline comes from the same root word as disciple, which means student or learner. Discipline is forward-looking. It focuses on helping the child learn to make better choices in the future. It's about building skills and understanding and self-control. And discipline might involve consequences, but those consequences are teaching tools, not punishments. They're designed to help the child learn, not to make the child suffer. And here's the key: when you use punishment, when you give time-based consequences that are just about making your child suffer for what they did wrong, that's when children are most likely to say, I don't care. Because there's nothing for them to care about. There's no learning happening. There's no opportunity to fix things. There's no hope. It's just suffering. And so they shut down emotionally to protect themselves. But when you use discipline, when you give behavior-based consequences that teach and give your child an opportunity to demonstrate better behavior, that's when children are much more likely to engage, to care. Try, because now there's something in it for them. Now there's hope. Now there's a path forward. So I want to encourage you to shift your thinking from punishment to discipline, to shift from time-based consequences to behavior-based consequences, to shift from backward looking to forward looking. And when you do this, you'll find that your children say, I don't care, much less often, because they'll actually have something to care about. Let me give you some specific examples of how to do this. Let's say your child hit their sibling. Your punishment approach might be go to your room for an hour or no TV for the rest of the day. But your discipline approach would be you need to go calm down. And when you're ready, come back and we'll talk about better ways to handle your anger when you're frustrated. And then you need to make it right with your sister, maybe by apologizing and doing something kind for her. Do you see the difference? The first approach is just time-based suffering. The second approach teaches skills and requires the child to repair the relationship. Or let's say your child didn't do their homework. Your punishment approach might be you're grounded this weekend, but your discipline approach would be no screen time until your homework is done. And if this keeps happening, We'll set up a homework routine where you do homework right after school before any fun activities. Again, the first approach is just suffering. The second approach teaches responsibility and creates a structure for success. Or let's say your child lied to you about where they were going. Your punishment approach might be you can't go out with friends for a month, but your discipline approach would be you can't go out with friends until you've rebuilt my trust. And here's how you do that. You need to be completely honest with me for the next 2 weeks. Tell me where you're going, who you'll be with, when you'll be back, and then check in with me while you're out. And after 2 weeks of complete honesty, we'll talk about restoring your privileges. Do you see how this approach teaches the value of honesty and gives the child a clear path to restore the relationship? This is what effective discipline looks like. And when you do it this way, your child will almost never say, I don't care, because they'll be too busy working on demonstrating better behavior. So they can restore their privileges. Now, I want to address one more thing that I see all the time, and that is parents who give in when their child says, I don't care. The child says, I don't care. And the parent thinks, oh no, my consequence isn't working. I need to change it or give up. And so they back down, they remove the consequence, they try something else. And this is absolutely the worst thing you can do, because now you've taught your child that all they have to do to get out of a consequence is say, I don't care, and you'll back down. So here's my rule. Once you give a consequence, you follow through no matter what your child says, no matter how they react, unless the consequence was truly inappropriate or unfair, you stick with it because consistency is one of the most important parts of effective parenting. If you're wishy washy, if you back down, if you change your mind all the time, your children will learn that your consequences don't really mean anything, and they'll push back every single time. But if you're consistent, if you follow through every time, if your children know that when you say something you mean it, then they'll take your consequences seriously, even if they say, I don't care in the moment. All right, let me wrap this up, because I know I've covered a lot of ground today, but this is such an important topic, and I want to make sure you really understand it. So let me summarize the main points first. When your child says, I don't care, they probably actually do care. They're just protecting their ego and trying not to let you see that you got to them. And that's okay, you don't need them to admit it. The consequence is still working. Second, if your child genuinely doesn't care, it might be because you gave a time-based punishment instead of a behavior-based consequence. And the solution is to shift to consequences that give your child an opportunity to demonstrate better behavior and earn back their privileges. Third, if your child genuinely doesn't care, it might be because you picked the wrong consequence, something they don't actually value. And the solution is to pay attention, figure out what your child really cares about, and use that as your leverage. Fourth, stay calm when your child says, I don't care. Don't escalate, don't pile on more consequences. Don't get into a power struggle. Just calmly state the consequence and walk away. Fifth, understand the difference between punishment and discipline, and focus on discipline, on teaching, on helping your child learn to make better choices, not just on making them suffer for past mistakes. And sixth, be consistent, follow through with consequences even when your child says, I don't care, because consistency is what teaches your children that you mean what you say. If you can implement these principles, I promise you'll see a dramatic change in your child's behavior. And in your relationship with your child, you'll have fewer power struggles, less defiance, more cooperation, and most importantly, you'll be teaching your child valuable life skills about responsibility and self-control, and making good choices. Now I know this is a lot to take in, and I know that changing your parenting approach isn't easy, especially if you've been doing things a certain way for a long time. But I want to encourage you that it's worth it. It really truly is worth it, because the way you discipline your child today shapes the kind of adult they'll become tomorrow. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope this has been helpful for you, and remember, parenting is hard, but you're not alone. We're all in this together, learning and growing, and trying to do our best for our kids.